This isn't clickbait. I have undeniable evidence that not only proves God, but identifies it. The God. Meaning, I've been forced to abandon my atheistic views, and you're at risk of doing so as well. You have been warned. And I did this with the following definition of God. God seems defined as an omnipresent entity that exists everywhere and watches everyone, an omniscient being that knows everything past, present, and future, an omnibenevolent deity that determines what's good for its creations by guiding them with promises of rewards and punishments, an omnipotent spiritual presence that creates and controls all life in the universe that's both beyond human comprehension and simple enough to explain to children. And someone who wants and may need a personal relationship with you, even though at its minimum it is the most powerful thing in the universe. I understand that not all religions agree with this definition, and that is okay. However, to discover anything, a solid definition must be in place, and this one fits the bill for most Abrahamic beliefs at the very least. Additionally, to find something that satisfies the God belief of every religion and perspective would be searching for the equivalent of Spider-Man if he could also be defined as Marge Simpson. With that in mind, I'll now explain God. Microorganisms are alive, invisible to the naked eye, and make up approximately 100 trillion non-human bacterial cells, with their own complement of genes, meaning there are 10 times more microbial cells than human cells, and several hundred different kinds of them in the human body. In particular, there are between 30 trillion and 400 trillion living microorganisms in the human gastrointestinal tract. And these bacteria make up 90% of the gut's microbial community. This is relevant to God because from the perspective of single-celled organisms, humans seem to fit the definition of God, and the perspective of microbes is relevant to discovering God, since a valid definition must be consistent across all perspectives, no matter how molecular. Meaning that the definitions and perspectives of God that microbes theoretically perceive must be as valid as our own, if we are to remove our biases and observe God from an objective standpoint. So, in the eyes of the gut biome community and all the other microbes inhabiting your body, a human is an omnipresent entity that exists everywhere and watches everything, via our brain unconsciously coordinating and controlling our bodies. An omniscient being that roughly knows the past, present, and future of their community of microorganisms, and of the bodies they inhabit. An omnibenevolent deity that defines what's good for its microbes by guiding them with promises of healthy food rewards and unhealthy food punishments. An omnipotent spiritual presence that created and controls more living organisms than there are humans on the earth, and is beyond microbial comprehension, but a simple enough concept to explain. This being that the universe microorganisms inhabit is alive, and someone who wants and definitely needs a mostly mutual beneficial personal relationship with all microbes within the microorganism community to stay alive. I say mostly because once a human dies, gut bacteria in particular will keep living, digest you from the inside out, abandon you, and survive out in the world till they find a new host to colonize. Considering microbes don't need their gods after having been created by them, their independence from our bodies, dead or alive, suggests that an objective meaning for life isn't found by discovering the creator of everything and praising them for existence. Instead, microbes prove that the universal meaning of life may be nothing more than a drive to survive, and that being a god doesn't change the fact that we all simply exist and share the same goals as the microbial civilizations we created. However, since microbes can survive without us, but we can't survive without them, this dynamic suggests that being a god means the prey that our creations don't abandon us after damaging their universe, that being our bodies too many times. So let's make the most of our existence while our microbes live blissfully within us, and ensure that we keep our gut biome equivalent of a universe we live in going for as long as possible. Because unlike our microbes, there may not be anywhere else to colonize once our theoretical, universal, godlike being dies before humanity does. But perhaps God being human is an unsatisfactory conclusion. In that case, I'll explain something else that also fits the definition of God. In darkness, a light may shine brightly and allow us to witness divinity. Humans are made in God's image. Humans are the flesh and blood children of God itself. And once resurrected from the infinite void of death, we can witness our true gods, who, for better or worse, are our mother and father. Parents are relevant to God because from a newborn's perspective, adult humans fit the definition of God. In the eyes of a newborn baby, a parent is an omnipresent entity that seems to exist everywhere, watching them 24/7 via baby monitors and teamwork between parents. An omniscient being that knows everything past, present, and future regarding their child's ancestry, upbringing, and potential. An omnibenevolent deity that defines what is good for their children by guiding them with promises of rewards and punishments. An omnipotent, falsely perceived spiritual presence that created and controls not only them, but also their home. That would be beyond a baby's comprehension, but simple enough to explain to children. And is someone who wants and may need a personal relationship with their child, even though, at minimum, from the baby's point of view, mums and dads are the most powerful beings in the universe. Additionally, much like the traits of the Abrahamic God that Jews, Christians, and Muslims follow, parents have the power to abandon their kids and tease ideas of their not-so-imminent return, make their love mysterious by verbally and physically abusing their children, and threaten their children with ostracization and both physical and psychological torture for not being obedient and thankful enough to them. Furthermore, having children isn't necessary for a human to be a god, even under this interpretation of the definition, since a god's status isn't a title that's earned the moment they're perceived that way. Once a god, always a god, meaning that even newborn infants and unborn fetuses are gods in their own way if they have the capacity to create life, even if those living organisms are mere microorganisms. We may not feel like stereotypical omni-everything immortal gods at the moment, but when we were just mere sperm, wouldn't it be logical to believe that that was what we'd become? Despite that, as newborns grow up and humanize their gods by learning to relate and understand their parents, one eventually discovers there's nothing particularly unique about being identified as a god. Furthermore, the less someone gets identified as a god, the more we are driven to find someone or something that does, suggesting that even if we met any stereotypical religious god, we'd want to find the actual god once the initial one got normalized, humanized, and understood, making the search irrelevant. So per the definition, I discovered that God was nothing more than a mere human being again. But that answer might still be unsatisfactory, because while it may appear factual and logical, most people get a sense of meaning not from truth, but from the feelings that drive their reasons to live. Plus, exposing God defeats the need for having faith, making all Abrahamic religious practices both irrelevant once belief has been turned to fact, and oppressive once their dictatorial intentions are revealed to disillusioned followers. Because of that, I'll explain something else that fits the definition of God. Okay, this may seem ridiculous at first, but I swear that regardless of being near a burning bush and taking hallucinatory drugs, what I saw was real. Harry the Invisible Dragon genuinely revealed himself for a moment and told me that every religion is wrong, because he is the true God of the universe. I promise that this is no flying spaghetti monster or Mother Nature, and that this really happened. He even gave me a warning to share with everyone I meet that he'll burn the world and leave every evil person who doesn't accept his loving guidance to agonizingly burn for eternity. To which, if you want to avoid such a terrible fate and accept his love, you only need to pay me 5% of your weekly income to ensure that Harry flies by your side, guiding you on a correct path of happiness and safety, and to stop him from potentially burning you alive. That may seem like a lot, but it's half the price that Jesus expected from traditional Christians, so maybe give Harry, the true God, a chance. Especially since Harry the Invisible Dragon matches the God definition, as he's an omnipresent, silent, intangible flying entity who doesn't need wings, that exists everywhere by infinitively duplicating itself and watching everyone with a singular mind shared by all its duplicates. An omniscient being that knows everything past, present, and future. An omnibenevolent deity that determines what's good for its creations by guiding them with promises of rewards and punishments. An omnipotent spiritual presence that creates and controls all life in the universe. That's, in short, he just perfectly fits the definition of God that I've repeated throughout the video. Now, I do see how this could initially sound like a scam, and that the foundations of this belief could gain a following that may make my community... What else is there? May make my assembly look like a cult, due to my lack of evidence for Harry the Invisible Dragon's existence. But that'll change once Harry's done inspiring me to write his holy scripture that proves his existence and should be held as truthful evidence, because it claims to be. If curious about what he has to say, our holy scripture will be called the Tresme Broble. And if you want to know what he looks like, how dare you? Harry doesn't like pictures of himself. Not because he's camera shy and has self-esteem issues, of course. He just knows that power comes from being an everlasting symbol that instills fear and humility for those who witness it. And he's invisible, so there are no pictures of him. Except for this one of him as a baby, and this one of him looking cool, plus this one where he sacrificed himself for our benefit, and also this one of him justly torturing people who don't accept his love. And the baby one again to distract you from the potentially morally grey stuff. Debate me on this if you want, but even if I lose, I'll still win when the public equates the existence of Harry the Invisible Dragon to any science-oriented or, ironically, religious opposing sides. Beyond our comprehension, Harry will always be by your side and unconditionally love you, unlike the other Abrahamic god whose personality disorders cause Yahweh to narcissistically brags about feeling more superior and important than others, while expecting constant praise and admiration to feed his ego. Antisocially behaves recklessly, impulsively, aggressively, and violently to others, with little to no regret or concern for those he harms even by mistake. Lastly, cowardly show no accountability for any wrongdoings by gaslighting followers into thinking his silence, his abandonment, and the hard times he planned are caused by both non-followers and followers who don't believe hard enough, no matter how much they try. Finally, Harry the Invisible Dragon doesn't need to witness any bodily mutilation, pedophilia, or sexism to trust that his followers love him and appreciate everything he offers. Unlike the gods ruling Jews, who traditionally let rabbis use their mouths to clean the blood off the wounds of circumcised babies. Christians, who can forgive the countless priests and clergy members for their sexual abuse towards children. And Muslims, who normalized the oppression of women by segregating them in mosques and forcing them to fully cover up in public. However, despite all the good things God, Harry the Invisible Dragon, offers, he was actually created by myself through using my imagination. And anyone powerful enough to create a god must also be a god themselves. So once again, it seems that God can be defined as being human, or as make-believe concepts that take advantage of human psychology and their desperation for questions to have feel-good answers that shield them from unpredictable, anticlimactic, disappointing truths. But that answer also may not satisfy, since humans aren't what people visualize when they think about what a god is. Except for Christians, North Koreans, Jews, the ancient Greeks, and many other religious gods that, at the very least, have some human characteristics. Regardless, I'll now explain the fourth and final thing that fits the definition of God. The final entity that also fits the definition of God and also has nothing to do with being human is our sun, I suppose. It just seems consistent with the definition, since the sun is an omnipresent entity that exists everywhere with its ever-expanding heat, like a human. An omniscient being that roughly knows the past, present, and future, but it's not sentient, so... An omnibenevolent deity that determines what's good for its creations on Earth, in particular by guiding them with heat-based rewards and punishments. But guiding likely isn't the right word for it. So. An omnipotent spiritual presence that creates and controls all life in the universe, that's both beyond human comprehension and simple enough to explain to children. Something that wants and may need a personal relationship with you, even though at its minimum, it is the most powerful thing in the universe. Alright, that last one may be the worst connection. But since ancient history suggests that praising the sun as a godlike figure isn't a stretch for the human imagination, perhaps it could actually be God. I mean, unlike the gods of every other religion, at least there's proof that the sun exists. However, the sun is just another force of nature, like everything and everything else in the universe, created by natural processes, despite anyone's ignorance of evolution and the Big Bang Theory. Furthermore, using a vague God concept to fill in the knowledge of what sparked any singularities, such as the Big Bang, is fallacious, as it doesn't explain what sparked that God's existence in the first place. If God can be a force of nature that has always existed, so can the void of space, which naturally sparked life into existence, like it has done. To which using a God of the gaps argument like this one will only keep us further from the truth. Additionally, God is supposed to be supernatural, and therefore an imaginary being fooling vulnerable people with indoctrination, delusions, and confusions. But if God doesn't exist, and doesn't need to exist for us to explain anything at all, why have I both stopped identifying as an atheist, and claimed that this video would convince all viewers to stop identifying as one also? Well, here's the answer. In hindsight, perhaps I haven't discovered an external God after all, and it seems that no one else has either, because every religion can be proven wrong by the fact that all religious scripture was written by people who were inspired by a more popular version of Harry the Invisible Dragon, who weren't present to witness the events they described. All religions are at best historical fiction based on a collection of myths and legends passed down through generations, which were rewritten and altered during each retelling, all due to the logic of the telephone game, the fact that schizophrenia wasn't discovered, the lack of glasses, and the obsession with hallucinatory drugs. Despite that, since an atheist is someone who doesn't believe in the existence of God or gods, I genuinely don't identify as an atheist anymore, since I believe the first three examples fit the definition perfectly, even if God turned out to be human all along. This is a conclusion that's supported upon asking the following questions. If our humility prevents us from being gods to our microorganisms, wouldn't the same logic apply to a god of the universe? And if our knowledge prevents us from viewing parents as gods, wouldn't the same logic also apply to a stereotypical god whose mysterious nature was revealed through humanizing him and freeing ourselves from the ignorance of his reality? If you answered no to those questions, please explain why in the comments below. Additionally, it seems that finding God is an endless search for something that has always resided within us, and in every living thing. Whether it's scam artists, religious leaders who create imaginary perfect versions of themselves to strive for what they desire, or anyone who humanizes objects so they don't feel utterly alone. It seems that the common denominator of belief is that it must help people feel better about themselves, no matter how fantastically spiritual and damaging to non-followers and even other followers it may be. But accepting the fact that humans are, by definition, gods, isn't supposed to feel good by itself. Because it's meant to make you feel like there's potential to not only be great, but to help others respectfully be the best gods they possibly can as well. The answer may seem simple and anticlimactic, but God only exists if we identify as such. If all life can be viewed equally as such as well, then perhaps we'll be more driven to treat others with the same respect that's expected of them. By being a good person, not because a heavenly reward is expected or a hellish punishment is looming, but for the sake of empathetically being good so that future generations can live the healthier, safer, happier lives you wish to have been born with. In short, this search for God and the truth has led me to one conclusion. It's taken this long to discover God because the real God was the friends we made along the way.